on stream. Hello, and welcome to the RPG Talk Show. I'm your host, Hawk Robinson, with
John Wilker.
And we have moved our weekly show from Saturdays, 11 a.m. to noon, to now be Thursdays, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Although we're a little, we're still, we have to get used to the new groove. But that is the schedule going forward. Thursdays, 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. You can catch the RPG Talk Show. Our website is rpgtalkshow.com. And of course, we stream on twitch.tv/RPG Research when the show is live. So we do a live broadcast, and then the recordings immediately get uploaded to our Patreon supporters to have access later. And then a month or so later, those become available to the general public. And the RPG Talk Show is not like the other RPG talk shows that talk about the latest modules and releases, etc. We'll do that occasionally, but we're really focused on keeping you up to date on the latest research and information and news related to the effects of role-playing games in all formats: tabletop, live action, computer-based, and solo adventure books and modules, and their potential to help various populations achieve their educational, recreational, professional, and therapeutic goals. We will mention new releases and such when we think there's some overlap there, but that's not what we focus on. You can get that information from plenty of other sites and shows. But we will go ahead and start with the news, and then talk about the community stuff going on, and then some research info, etc. John, you want to go ahead and start?
So we're going to start off with news from my favorite news group, EN World, or N World as some people pronounce it. One of these days I'm going to have to ask and see which one's right.
That's a good question,
yeah. So this was posted on Monday, October 15th. D&D Sports, competitive play with prizes. D&D Beyond and Encounter Role-Playing have announced D&D Sports. It's the first online Dungeons & Dragons tournament in cooperative party versus party setting from Encounter Role-Playing D&D Beyond, with a grand prize of $5,000 for the team.
Yeah, that's a start. Remember when that started with video games, professional video games?
Yeah.
It used to be small amounts here and there. Now you're 6 digits or more.
And they say it's not an e-sport, but they are using Roll20.
Okay.
And everybody's going to have, there are 15 pre-generated characters to choose from. The first one will be November 10th at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Beholder versus Mind Flayer teams.
So how long does a session run?
It does not say, but they are the best of 3 battles.
Right.
So I guess it's as long as it takes them to kill each other off.
So these are actual just like toe-to-toe roll the dice till they kill each other, or is there some role play to it? Or
I don't know if there's a maze or...
It says the full rules for D&D Sports will be released shortly after our next round of play testing, so they're still play testing it. We don't claim to have created the perfect balance, nor is that our aim, as every competitive game has an element of strategy. We're also implementing MOBA-esque mechanics, M-O-B-A. Do you know that acronym?
I have no idea what that means.
Look that up. Such as pick/ban phase to help expand the strategy. We've been working closely with over a dozen talented DMs to create those generated characters, etc. 5th edition rules. They think it'll be a fun way to play D&D. It sounds like UPS guy just rang the doorbell. It's not an e-sport. We created something that would make competitive gamers feel safe and comfortable trying out D&D 5e for the first time. That's interesting. It's a new way to display the versatility of combat in D&D 5e in a unique setting. We encourage you to respect the way different people play D&D, because we know that this will be a fun event and there's no wrong to play wrong way. Typo there. No wrong way to play D&D as long as you're having fun. Yeah, as long as nobody's hurt in the process.
Okay, so immediately, Thursday, October 18th, this is 3 days later, the big news is D&D Sports is gone. It is now RPG Sports.
Yeah, right.
Because it is not sponsored by Wizards of the Coast.
And they didn't have the right to use the trademark D&D.
Yeah. So, and they are now going to open it to other role-playing games. They will be starting with Dungeons & Dragons.
So they didn't get permission first.
Right. They didn't go ahead and get our route and get that.
How many times have I warned people? That's why we've got a big old printout right in the trailer and elsewhere saying we explicitly ask permission. This is a copyrighted product, and it's a trademarked product, And if you want to make money or even just get famous with it, you better ask for permission first, or else that's what happens. So please, people, ask permission. They are, if you can get a hold of them, that's the challenge. Mm-hmm. But once you get a hold of them, they're very not a problem. They're as long as it's not something they disagree with strongly, or they have something in the works already.
Right.
They're usually but they are very picky about the trademark. That's the thing, in our case, we're allowed to use it and everything, but we can't say exclusively D&D. We can say games like D&D and such and such and such and such. That's what you got to be careful. If they would have said, RPG sports initially, and they used D&D, they might not have gotten as much trouble. They still would need to ask permission if there's any money involved.
Right.
So be careful there, people. This is. I've gotten a little bit of flack from people about my efforts to handle this like a profession. They're like, you're turning my hobby into a profession. And I'm like, you have hobby level of everything, and sometimes there's professional level. They're not mutually exclusive. You have the different range. But the moment you want to try to be professional about it, you better be really careful about copyright and trademark, because everybody wants their slice of the pie, and you have to be really careful. So that's that. There you go. There's a beautiful example of that.
It's definitely that way. RPGsports.com.
They probably got a cease and desist. They probably got a cease and desist that also said they couldn't say that they got a cease and desist.
Well, yeah, they specifically do not state in their article that they were told not to do it, but they did also specifically state that we're not sponsored by Wizards of the Coast.
Yes.
So that tells me there was a conversation.
Yes. I have seen this many times over the years. Everybody's like, oh, D&D doesn't do anything. I'm like, baloney. I know they've given lots of cease and desists out, and the cease and desists say, do not say anything, or we will,
Yeah.
A lot of cease and desists
don't give us bad press because we told you to stop stealing from us.
Yeah. So, I have issues with that, with the cease and desist, that you can't tell people about that. That's kind of, I think, an overreach and an abuse, but better to not mess with it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, be careful, people.
If you want to know more, rpgsports.tv, and unfortunately, they made the biggest mistake of all. They didn't invite us to play.
That was the biggest mistake. Except, me, I don't like the competitive aspect. I'm all about the cooperative. I've done tons of competitive stuff. I've been in martial arts since I was 4. Various sports, basketball and soccer and volleyball and what have you, and it's all competitive stuff, and it's fine, it's fun enough. But I really like the cooperative so much more. That's part of what I love about role-playing gaming, is it is that cooperative aspect. Well, but I know for other people they only like competition.
Dungeons & Dragons does have its grounds in competitive play. It came from wargaming. That's true. And a lot of the most popular modules out there from the first and second edition were tournament games.
Right. Yes.
But that was team versus team to get to accomplish a goal.
Yes,
not
group.
Team slaughtering the other team.
Exactly. Your groups worked together. Yeah. And then whoever did the best job as a group, then it was figured out. But
it wasn't gladiatorial combat like this is going to be.
Drake was just pointing out how Neverwinter Nights, somebody ran through the whole campaign in a speed play in like 30 minutes or something.
Wow!
Like the original Neverwinter Nights or something. Again, that's a second hand. I want to double check that. And I'm just like, whoa, that's a pretty long campaign. But the speed play, they love to do that, and they've turned it into a competition by seeing who can get through the fastest.
It's
a thing.
That hurts my brain.
It's a thing. Each their own. And I totally agree with their statement. As long as you're having fun and nobody's hurt in the process,
right?
Then you're doing it right. I agree. As we've been reading, if you haven't caught them yet, we've been reading through in depth Robin's Laws of Good Game Mastering by Robin D. Laws through Steve Jackson Games from 2002. So if you haven't caught this already, we've been doing entire sessions reading this and talking about it in depth. And that's another thing he says, like, hey, as long as everybody's having fun, you're doing it right.
So one of the main purposes for this tournament, of course, is that these players got a chance to make money.
Right, yeah. Which leads to
paid game mastering.
Indeed.
As anybody who's been following us knows that we are definitely interested in the idea of getting paid to be role dungeon masters, in whether it's a therapeutic, educational, or even entertainment phase. Which brings us to an article here, 23 Thoughts on Paid GMing, a Great Income Stream or Doomed to Failure. I haven't finished reading this entire article, but
Right.
I did start it.
Well, so the article itself was posted clear back on March 13th, 2017.
So
That's
it's
when
a
it
little
was
more than a
originally
year old.
posted. And so it's accumulated comments. And I
Yeah.
don't know if I commented or not, but I for some reason got notified that somebody recently commented, and it's the guy who wrote the original article a year and a half later. So his premise in the original article, if I can, now I gotta go back. So he noticed that Roll20, had recently begun, this is again back in March 2017, had recently begun to offer GMs the ability to mark their game listings as pay to play. An interesting proposition, but I'm not convinced that it's all good. So then he goes through all his explanations, and he says, in conclusion, while some people will no doubt embrace paid GMing, and no doubt encounter some of the issues mentioned in this article, the simpler approach is to occasionally bring the pizza and beer for your GM. Perhaps as a party you could chip in to buy him or her the adventure you want to run, or chip in a small amount towards the Roll20 subscription. An arrangement between friends for such a small amount doesn't, in my opinion, fall into the pay-to-play category, which seems to me to have a much more commercial focus. It saves the GM bank balance from taking a hit, shows them some love, and you'll all benefit in the long run. So that was his comment back. That was his article back then. So fast forward a year and a half later, and is this the same guy? I want to make sure that's the same guy. Somebody's
Return
been
of the
commenting.
DM is the person who should be making the comment.
The one what?
Return of the DM.
Let's see. Well,
Or George Parker was the one who wrote the actual module. But
no, it is Return of the DM, yeah. So
Yeah.
now, October 25th, 2018 at 12:21 p.m., I have to admit that I've completely revised my view of paid DMing since I wrote this article. And he was part of that platform. I think if there's a market there and people are happy with the arrangement, then I'm not at all opposed to it. Dare I say that I'd actually consider doing it myself if it weren't for the fact that I'm already up to my neck in 2 existing campaigns. What I did notice was that there still seems to be a general lack of interest from players. I disagree. I was briefly a member of the site Looking for GM, which didn't ever really get off the ground. All paid games were pretty much empty of players. Unfortunately, I think this will ever be thus with the players who never DM. They simply don't appreciate the effort involved in DMing and prepping, and so can't see why DMs could possibly want some kind of remuneration. I totally disagree. And there were fundamental problems with that platform that they were warned about.
Right.
The Society of Professional Game Masters and such warned them about because of their rating system and a lot of other things, and they didn't have like we have with the background checks and all of that.
It wasn't a professional standard.
It wasn't marketed. Like nobody really knew about it except other dungeon masters and such. It came and went very quickly because of technical and other issues, technical and legal issues, I believe. And they didn't really understand business. Like they were working on a platform that had potential, but they did not really seem to understand business and tax law and all these other things. So just because that particular platform didn't work doesn't mean the idea was bad. It just means the implementation failed. People often get confused between concept and implementation. Some of the best ideas have gone through many implementations of failure before they get the right implementation. Doesn't mean it was a bad
999
idea.
ways to make a light bulb.
That's right. Until you finally got, and even that has since long been replaced with LED and such.
Right.
So that's something people often confuse. They'll point to a failure and say, well, see, it was a bad idea. No, not necessarily. It may be a bad idea, but one failure does not indicate that. All that indicates is a poor implementation. From my personal experience, there's overwhelming demand. That's why I've had to backpedal, slow down, stop my client base so that I can train people and create a properly trained professional base that then redirect all the work to. How much work there is in the pure entertainment field? Yes, there's less demand for that than compared to educational and therapeutic settings, but it's growing. It's definitely growing. There's
right.
Without a doubt, it's going exponentially up. It was this now 5 years ago, not so much. Definitely educational and therapeutic demand, but the pure entertainment side, yeah, people weren't so interested in paying. But as people are continuing to have less and less leisure time, and they want their quality of their leisure time to maximize that experience, so RPG optimization, right?
Exactly.
Research on optimization.
Book coming out soon.
Yeah, that one's next year. The RPG Professionals Handbook is the end of December. So they want, if they've only got 3 hours, they want to maximize their 3 hours to have the most enjoyment. who was it I was just having? Oh, it was with the researchers this Tuesday. We had a great conversation. If you didn't catch that stream, check it out if you're a Patreon supporter or a subscriber. And Omar, who's in Saudi Arabia, and also Eric, who's here in Spokane, brought up a great point about this younger generation isn't interested in owning things. They're interested in experiences.
Right.
Right. They don't own DVDs. They don't own cars. They're really not into materialism. They're into experientialism, if you will, into experiences. They want to have remarkable experiences. And that's where the professional DM needs to excel. But you have to be remarkable. If your DMing experience is just going to be like you could get down at the local game store or your friend's house, then, and you're not going to be exceptionally good as a DM. It doesn't have to have, the D&D B&B is a wonderful idea. More power to them. I hope that works out. That's all great. That's on the right, you've got the right idea there. But that isn't, gimmicks, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but gimmicks are not going to automatically make it an exceptional experience.
Spending $500 on Beatles and Bards Platinum Edition box won't make up for a poor DM.
Right, exactly. So the key thing is to be an exceptional DM in any environment. And then if you can add some extra perks like an exceptional environment, we've got the mobile trailer and the bus and such. But if we're crappy DMs, the bus and trailer are meaningless. A, you've got to be a really good DM and provide an exceptional experience. And then B, if you can optimize the setting, so much the better. Then they get to really enjoy the experience that much more. So they go hand in hand. They are all important variables taken into account for optimizing the RPG experience. So, so it's interesting that he's at least come around, even though he saw this platform fail that they were doing. So that I just thought that was worth sharing, a year and a half later.
And it's good to admit when you're doing things wrong and
that's
go
right.
back
And then learn from those things. Okay, the
So-
link is in there. Right below that one is the PAX one.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Now, talking about using role-playing games in educational therapeutical means, you'll notice there's a link in your notes for Dragon Plus. Dragon Plus is Dragon Magazine since
Since they folded.
they killed the
They
paper.
rebooted, yeah.
Yeah, and it's been rebooted as a digital only. It is free. So you can go to Dragon Plus and you can apply for those articles. The last two magazines specifically had things that were interesting to me. Raise the glass as Dragon Plus becomes 21. Back out of here real quick.
Dead air.
Dead air, yes. It is. Oh, it is 21. That was apparently a joke about the fact that it is the 21st issue. I thought it was like 21 years. He said that's impossible. But it's okay. The 21st issue. So Dragon Magazine is now legally able to drink. We'll talk more about that later. So that issue article, they had two articles that were interesting to me. Which one was top tips for playing D&D with kids. We asked the experienced founders of gaming clubs to share their invaluable advice for bringing younger players to the D&D fold, and they didn't disappoint. The next article is about kid-friendly D&D. Ease kids into the world of Dungeons & Dragons with these accessible rules and straightforward gaming modules. And they presented some modules, not most of which actually weren't written by Wizards of the Coast or written for Wizards of the Coast. And they go ahead and mention on, let me just name some of these games here. The core rules, DM's Guild is what it says. An Ogre in His Cake, which was written for 5th edition. That is written for ages 5 and up. And they mention No Thank You Evil.
Yes, of course.
They also mention Munchkin card game as an introductory to D&D.
Yes, oh, definitely.
Hidden Halls of Hazakor.
Don't know that one.
Yeah, it's a $10 to $30 range, and DriveThruRPG website is where you can get it.
Okay.
And so that one's there. That was those particular articles, and the other article that I found was in Dragon 22 a year later. That article was specifically about education and behind the screens learning with D&D. Language pathologist Carrie Olson finally explains how playing Dungeons & Dragons in aiding the development of children with learning difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
So
Plenty of research on that.
yeah, and that's our
That's what we do. Yeah.
So there's that nice article there. I'm glad to see that Wizards of the Coast, through the Dragon magazine, is addressing these issues and showing these articles, because in the paper version and all the other 20 editions of Dragon Plus, I don't recall seeing too many articles about people actively attempting to use this as an education modality or for anything other than
for decades.
games. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, Rebecca down in Oakland with the Roleplay Workshop, roleplayworkshop.com. So when I was on the RPG tour, the 8-state RPG tour, over the past month, I met with her and did an interview, and I'll be uploading that exclusive interview to our Patreon supporters.
The rest of you will be very old when it comes out.
And so I interviewed her just outside her roleplay workshop there in Oakland, California, which, by the way, speaking of professional DMs, she's looking to hire. If you can come to the Oakland area, it's her own. So a quick story about her, Rebecca. She was a professional certified instructor at a school, and elementary school. And she started incorporating role-playing gaming into her teaching outside of school, like after school and summer camp. She was working on it. And her kids were so excited they were begging her to do more of that. And she came to the conclusion after a few years of those part-time programs that they were the most effective modality for teaching that she had seen. So she quit her job as a teacher to become a full-time professional game master with her own game system. So this is also addressing the trademark and copyright issues.
Right.
Her own game system, her own setting, specifically learning to teach and train and all of this, and has been doing that for a living. So those of you who are poo-pooing the concept of a professional dungeon master, for 25 years, she's been doing that as her sole source of income. And she's had upwards of 3 other dungeon masters under her being paid to run her system and such. Now, she doesn't currently have those. She needs more people. So she is hiring. If you can get to the Oakland area, go meet with her and see if you're a valid candidate and you could be making a living as a dungeon master.
I think that somebody should make a N-World article advertising the fact that that's happening.
I'm going to reach out to Michael Tresca, because he's been a really good resource for that. When I get the video, and I think he's one of our donors, when I get the video up there, I'll ask him to make an article to link to it when we go public with it or something. So, I'm going to do everything I can to help promote what she's been doing for all these years. She's the second longest person I've met doing this. Myself being the longest so far.
Right.
I'm waiting. I'm sure somebody out there has been doing this still longer than me. Somewhere, somebody is, and it's just they're just not out. As she said, she's not a business person. She's not into marketing, all of that. She's getting ready. She's trying to put together publishing the book of her setting, which, by the way, she's interested in us going ahead and helping playtest that.
Oh, love to.
So that would be great. But she's not that kind of business person. That's not her forte at marketing and everything.
Right.
She's just really good at what she does, teaching and doing role-playing gaming. So, and that's an issue for a lot of these. Even if you are a great dungeon master, that doesn't mean you're a good business person. Doesn't mean you're a good entrepreneur.
Right. That's the same with most arts.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. Well, and this is a mixture, right? Yeah. Yes, there's a performance art to it, and yet overall, it is a profession. If you are trying to make a living at it and such, and so then you need to treat it more like a profession rather than just freelance art. I'm a musician as well, and I was a professional photographer for a lot of years, so I've got art background in me as well. And as a photographer, to become a professional, you focus your energy differently than if you're a pure art photographer. I got to do, the good thing is my profession paid for when I wanted to do my art photos. So, I was shooting portfolios for modeling agencies, for half a dozen modeling agencies, and that paid for my studio and my equipment and my darkroom, and all that stuff was getting paid for, doing what I loved, but a little more mechanical than was my favorite kind. But I rarely had to shoot weddings or schools or anything like that, because I hated those. Because those really didn't let me be as creative. At least with the portfolios, the creativity's still there to some degree. And then I shot menus, for restaurants. Like I did printing for Sizzler things like, the restaurants, etc.
Right.
I did photo shoots with like oh my goodness, I'm going to blank on Utah Jazz. Carl Malone, did photo session with him. So I shot a bunch of bands, album covers, etc. So I had a good variety there. But then there was my artsy stuff, and you've seen like the one in the TV room there with
right.
the Poirot doll. One morning I just woke up at like 5 a.m. going, I have this great idea, I gotta shoot, right? The muses had me. And I was able to call this goth friend of mine and her sister, and she was cool. She was over there by 6 a.m. with all her goth stuff, and we went out shooting out at the park all day long. All day. I went through rolls of film, got some great shots, and they were totally game with it. But it was because I was doing this profession. I had the resources to be able to live that. But you got to have your bread and butter work. So same thing with the D&D. I'm always going to keep doing my hobby gaming for fun, whether it's as a player or DM. But got to also make a living.
Right.
I've got my .com stuff, but it's dwindling rapidly. So
and when you go professional, you need to have professional standards and
That's right.
be places on time, hit those deadlines.
And speaking of professional standards, just a reminder: the RPG Professionals Handbook, which you can check out the ISBN on rpgpublishers.com, is slated to be published this late December. And it is going to be intentionally controversial. So I already put out a white paper years ago, request for comments, on professional standards in gaming. And I got a little bit of response here and there over the years, but
right.
Not a whole lot of attention. Somebody's got to start somewhere. So I'm going to fire this salvo out into the public as a big 8x10. It'll be pretty much like this book,
right?
Except purple with gray and stuff, because that's kind of our
purple
and gray is kind of our thing, yeah. So it's going to be an 8x10 hardbound, fairly expensive book, about $70 retail, and professional, and upwards of 300 pages maximum. That's the maximum that binding will support for that price. Over time, I'll release the soft cover and then eventually the ebook, etc. But it says in the foreword, this is a first edition, and I welcome your comments. I am donning my
asbestos underwear.
Yes, asbestos underwear, my flame retardant clothing in preparation to be lambasted by other gamers and other professionals. And that's okay, because if people react, that means they're reading it. That means they're starting to consider the topics of professional standards. And if people make good suggestions that I think merit being in the next edition, which hopefully won't be too far after the first edition, I will gladly incorporate those and, of course, give credit and all of that where it's due. But somebody's got to start somewhere with professional standards. And so I'm firing that salvo at the end of December.
You're not going to steal the fonts from each of the D&D editions, are you?
No. It is probably going to be, it is probably, my writing is not entertainment writing. It is dry, professional, analytical stuff. I may have, this book will have a little bit of humor in it, but I'm not a comedian, so it may not, it is for professionals. It is not for the layperson. If you're a layperson, there's lots in there to learn to become a better game master, but this is for, if you want to be a professional game master in entertainment, recreation, and there's a difference between the entertainment and recreation type, education or therapeutic. Here's the baseline starting point that you should be living up to make your standards, set some good standards here to start with. Then for each division, I have separate books down the road in the works that will go into more detail for each of those fields, each of those verticals.
The deep dungeon delve into each one.
But there's a different approach to running a recreational game, so you're paid to run a game for people, but it's not public. You're not streaming, you're not doing it on stage, you're just running a recreational game. Then there's the entertainer type, where there's an audience. You're running a game and there's an audience. So in addition to pleasing your players, you've got to please either people streaming or on stage or a party, whatever, an event. That is a different style of running a game, and there are different, so you start with the recreational and then you layer that on top of it. So that's the closest one above it.
Right.
Above that, and there's professional considerations at just the recreational level, different professional considerations at the entertainment level. Above that, in level of complexity, is education. There's a lot of things you got to deal with in an educational setting, administrative and legal and different things you have to deal with. You don't get to kick your players out, right? You know,
Yeah.
recreational and entertainment.
Tommy,
you have
you're
a little
just
bit,
not learning. Go away.
You have a little more leeway to say, you know, you're not working out on the cast. Let's get you out of here. Which we've seen, you know, Critical Role and others, but people just mysteriously disappear and new people mysteriously appear. Somebody was commenting to us about how they're glad that we're transitioning Weevil. We explained, we said, you know, Bill wasn't quite happy with it not being heroic enough and didn't like the prejudice that was going on, and it wasn't his cup of tea. And that's great. We want people to understand that these are these differences. We talk about in here, different player types.
Right.
When I talk about player archetypes. So that shouldn't be a mystery to people. You know, there wasn't any drama about it. Bill wasn't furious or anything like that. He just went, you know, I just don't think this is working out for me. It's not the style I like. I'm like, great. I warned him that playing a non-human would be a problem.
Right, right.
That would really limit the role play options. And I get totally what he's saying, especially like the interview from, the magazine.
Other Minds?
No, the Tri-Cities Quinn. He's wrapping that up. That's going to get published soon. So that's going to be coming out soon. He's going to wrap in some of the RPG Tour stuff. The word count is as much as he'd like because the article's kept small. But anyway, as he interviewed here, and Bill talked exactly about why he likes role-playing. He wants to be the hero that he never gets to be in real life.
Right.
Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that conversation.
It totally makes sense that the experience he had under the constraints of my campaign would be his reaction.
Yeah, it's not very heroic when you spend the beginning
Slogging
part of the campaign
through the
just
mud.
running away from the enemy in horrible conditions.
Yes, yes. It is frustrating. It is a grind. And that's part of the campaign design. It's a little bit of a grit tester. Unfortunately, he left right before the stuff starts to get interesting.
All these parts that you wanted.
Yeah, we're finally happening.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit of a weeding out process. And but we didn't just poof him out, and we didn't not say, you know, because as far as I know, there's no hard feelings.
Right, there isn't. I talked to him yesterday.
Good.
And he was glad to hear that his character was still being played.
We're gonna phase him out within the story. You're playing him as a filler, and he will go off into the story. He'll be part of the story. And who knows? Someday, if he wants to make a guest appearance or something, we might bring Weevil in for a little
piloting
cameo.
his airship.
Yeah, one of the Elven airships. He got his dream. You never know; these things can happen. So, you know, if his character died, his character died. I let that happen. That happens. But that wasn't, you know, how it worked. But how these other shows have done that, I think, do a disservice to the audience. And so that is something I want to bring up as an important thing, that we're not doing it. We're letting people know what's going on a little bit behind the scenes. As far as I know, we're not having any big drama or anything. We don't have a lot of big egos. That being said, this week's show, wow. So, full disclosure, Katie, who plays Moisha, is my fiancée, or girlfriend, fiancée. We're still finalizing the fiancé thing. We're getting married July 4th next year. So, anyway, I still got to get down on one knee and do the ring thing. We've been together over 10 years. So, this was an interrogation one-on-one with each player. And I've done this in this campaign scores of times, with scores of groups over the decades. And so I had everybody leave the room, and then one-on-one went through the interrogation. And everybody I said, okay, I don't always know all the truth tidbits, and I'm not, you know, up to grade on your background, so tell me when your character is lying. Because there was a rope that would do, you know, it would tighten on them, etc. They could lose a limb. And everybody went, okay. And they played along with that. Until we got to Katie. No. I said, so tell me when you're lying. She's like, no, I'm not telling you. And I'm like, Nobody has ever done that in all the years I have run this. That they just went, no, I'm not going to play along. I'm not going to tell you what the truth is.
I'm going to make you work for it.
Oh, I love her. But the only other person, but he did it through his character that rebelled, was Joe, with his character fighting back in the game. Though he said, okay, so he told what he was lying, and he went along with it and suffered a little bit of damage in knowing that would be the case. He role played that well. And he's an improv professional and all of that. But he was the only other one who kind of rebelled. The others were really surprisingly compliant. I was amazed. This group needs to step it up a little bit. They got to step it up a little. But he was the only other one who really outright rebelled in a different way.
Right.
They are brother and sister. Hi, Drake.
You called for a group to step up.
By the way, Donna, if you're watching this, because I noticed you're starting to follow the stream, everybody in the group wants you to join. There is an opening now with Bill's character transitioning out. So if anybody wants to, that's Donna at geekytees.com. I tried to call her. They don't generally answer their phone because they want to focus on their customers, which is good. And I've sent an email. I haven't heard back yet.
Okay.
So, but Donna, if you're still interested, because remember she came running up when I was down there in Burbank wanting to play.
Right, yeah.
You know, and everybody here loved her so much, they've been going, ask her, ask her, ask her. So I tried calling. I couldn't get a hold of her directly, so we're putting the word out. But who knows? We'll see if that happens. I suspect with her work schedule and with her saying that she can't control her mouth that she might say no, but it would be great if she joined us. I think she'd be a great addition.
It's worth a try.
It is worth a try.
Speaking of players not doing what you were expecting them to do.
Yes.
I'm running a regular game at Uncle's in the Valley.
Yes.
And we're playing the same campaign that we broadcasted here.
Just this Tuesday, or Monday.
Just this Monday.
Yes.
And they're about the same place, except it's actually taking them longer to play because they wanted to intensify on the role playing.
Yeah, which is good.
And yeah, this is great. It's nice to have a group that isn't focused on kill the next guy.
I agree. That's my preference.
But this group was more interested in sleep with the next person.
So that's the fantasy part of fantasy role play.
Yeah. We did not go into details. We did the fade to black. The only details the closest is I need a performance check.
Yep.
And the one guy that tried to seduce the half orc, I also added a con check.
Okay.
Which the first session was okay. Second session he took some damage.
Yeah. And I don't have the book right here in front of me, so I forget the title. It's in the trailer.
I think it's called.
Well, it's sex in role playing games.
Yeah.
So it's from I think a psychological perspective, sociological perspective, discussing including sexuality in role playing games.
Right.
I haven't had a chance to read it, but I want to. It's not too long a read, but so we're gonna next week. I'm gonna get a chance to skim through it. I won't have time to go in depth because I got other things I'm delving into right now. But I'm gonna skim through it, and then you're gonna bring next week.
The Book of Erotic Fantasy.
Yeah, these are actual rules for incorporating sex into your game.
3.5.
3.5,
Dungeons & Dragons 3.5
Yep.
when they did the, what's that contract called?
Open game license.
Yeah, the open game license that let everybody play along.
Yep. And then I we're not going to show it because there's provocative imagery there that isn't family friendly and such.
Yeah.
But we'll kind of skim through that, talk about the chapters briefly, and then I will also bring up what's again just the surface level of the other book, and then that's something we'll go into a deeper discussion in other future talk shows or other broadcasts outside of the talk show. The talk show, being as short as it is, doesn't really have time to go too deep in that, but it'll at least make people familiar with some of the basic concepts. And you know, I incorporated sexuality in some of my games as young as when I was a teenager. You know, with my fellow teenagers.
That's where it starts.
Yeah, that's where it starts. And trying to come up with rules that were effective. Now, we did not get verbally graphic about the details, but I came up with a rule system to try to determine performance factor, emotional connection factors, all these different factors that can come up. But it was an entire setting revolving around all these people who competed in gladiatorial combat to sleep with the leader of this city-state. And they would have to literally put their lives on the line for a night or a weekend with this ruler. You know, in the hopes of maybe something more.
Right.
Because the story went out that this is her weeding out process to find her new, although she would still be, yeah, basically. It was a matriarchal society, so they wouldn't be an equal or superior; they'd be subservient. But her new spouse or whatever. So that was something. I mean, I was probably 14, 15, and it was an adventure. It was different, and we had different rules for all the different types of success and failure and emotional stuff that could happen, etc. So it'll be interesting to see what this other book has to say about it. So that's something I think next week we'll talk about a little bit more. Again, we can't go too deep with the talk show, but
right.
And maybe in future RPG theory discussions on Mondays and Thursdays from 6 to 9, we could actually really hit that topic. How do you handle sexuality in your game campaign?
And so far, the only thing we've covered is how to avoid it with the X card and the
exactly
lines.
People getting uncomfortable. What if you have a group of mature players who aren't uncomfortable with it? Or it's a bunch of teenagers who they get a little bit of a lascivious kick out of it. Oh well, whatever the reason. If you have a group that everybody is comfortable with some sexual activity it as part of the game, more than just a little flirting, etc., and more than just a performance check or what have you.
Right.
How do you handle that? That is a potential minefield. Anything that is potentially intense, whether it's politics, religion, sex.
I'm looking at minefields already for this game because this campaign is supposed to last until their 20th level.
Right.
So, what happens if this villain survives and wants to come back?
Right.
What happens if she becomes pregnant and now we have...
Or STDs. I always incorporate STDs. Every campaign where somebody says, I go sleep with the prostitute or whoever, I always roll STDs, whatever the system has available. Always.
Well, that's where it was covered by the book of erotic fantasy.
Yes.
Has those.
But MERP and Rollmaster includes it already. Or Rollmaster at least includes all that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's just there to roll. And even the DMG of first edition D&D has, you can roll for STDs and such. For diseases in the diseases section, I believe, if I remember correctly.
That's where paladins come in handy.
What's that?
That's where paladins come in handy.
Yeah, cure disease.
Yeah.
So so that's interesting. We'll have to see how that unfolds with your group and the consequences there. Did you roll?
I haven't yet.
Okay. You're going to look up the rules?
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna definitely have the rules handy for next time. I'm probably not going to actually bring the book to the game store, though.
Well, and so speaking of riskier, involving actions or topics in gaming that are considered a little more taboo or risky, what about Dragon's Fury games?
Well, and getting drunk during your game.
Yeah.
www.dragonsfurygames.com
And that's
is
with
their
an S,
website.
right? Dragons Fury?
Yeah, with
Okay.
an S.
Okay.
They are located at 41 East Queen Avenue, Suite B in Spokane, Washington, 99207.
So just south of the Northtown Mall, just off of Division in Wellesley, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So you got Wellesley, you got the mall, then you got Queens.
Okay.
And so you can see them all from their store. It is a games and anime store. Brand new. They're on a soft open right now. They haven't started advertising. They've been open for about a month, he said.
Okay.
They're going to open up a fairly large game room, which will have some really nice chairs. The chairs are rated at 400 pounds.
Okay. Good.
And
we know
they
that's an issue.
don't have the stuff to catch your back on. They have the kind of chairs you find in restaurants, like booth chairs
Okay.
as well. They are going to be serving alcohol,
Wow.
as well as snacks and things like that.
Mhm.
It is going to be a mixed crowd group, so the adults can drink while the kids are playing.
In the same room?
Yes.
Oh.
Places do that. Now, I don't know how the
The whole
rules...
minors, yeah, I mean, I remember as a kid, as minors, like, I know, but I mean, yeah, adults get to drink at bars and the kids can, they definitely loosened up the laws, because
Well,
it used to be way more restrictive.
You've always can be able to drink alcohol in a restaurant.
Yeah.
And
Well,
in a
depends on the
restaurant,
state
you
you're
have
in.
children at the restaurant.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I guess it demands how much food you're serving.
Probably, because I think a straight bar will say no minors allowed, but if it's a bar / pub, a tavern or whatever that's got food, then
Right.
Probably if they had a food handler's permit or something that's beyond alcohol, maybe that makes a difference. I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't know the rules.
My brother would know. He ran cantina and stuff in Guatemala and elsewhere, and he probably knows.
He's got a hint or two. They're also going to be charging for game time.
Okay, so like a space,
Yeah, so $5.
flat rate per hour
Not
per person.
per person.
Oh,
But that $5 goes towards your purchases.
okay, okay. So it's
And-
kind of a minimum, like some restaurants do, where you have a minimum seat rate or something like that.
Yeah.
It's basically like a door cover charge almost, kind of. Maybe.
Yeah.
Huh. That'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
But if you bring your own games, they're not going to charge you.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay, so you use their lending library.
If you use their lending library, it's
Okay.
$5. If you bring your own game, there's no charge. You can buy your own
I'll have to ask
alcohol.
Donna. I forgot to ask her. She said they have a whole lending library there and everything, and I think they even loan stuff out. I'm not sure, but I forgot to ask her if they charge for their lending library or not. I don't know. I don't know if that's a trend. That's something I should check into. That's good to know.
I don't charge for my lending library, but then you pay to get into the
Right?
convention.
Yeah, because at a convention. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to have to check with Donna on that. That would be good to know. Well, we'll have to see how that unfolds. We'll have to check that out. I'll have to go down there. Now, tell me what else you said, what that you read about my gamer floater theory.
Okay, yeah. Well, first of all, I gave him our card.
Okay.
And I
Did
told
they
him
have
about...
anybody? Is it anybody we know?
No, I've never seen this person
Who
before.
is it? Do you remember?
I don't remember him telling me his name.
Okay.
I'm sure he did.
Okay.
Right after he mentioned
he
that
gave the card. Did they know anything about us?
No, he had never heard of us.
Is he from town or out of town?
Originally out of town.
Okay. How long ago moved here?
This year.
Oh, really recent. Okay, that's why they don't know about us then.
Yeah.
Because
I
a lot of people know about us now in town.
Yeah, I've explained to him about a little bit about RPG research, a little bit about Spokane Area Gaming Alliance, a little about KaranukaCon, and of course SpoCon. And I told him, yeah, these are the kind of things that I do, and we do these things. And if you want to work together on something, let me know. He did specifically mention that he is catering a little bit to the players that, his words, haven't been treated so nicely by the other stores. I took this to directly mean the gamer floaters,
Who've been kicked out.
the people that weren't treated nicely because they weren't behaving well.
Right.
And he was also saying that, as long as people
behave,
are being respectful,
right?
He says, what's that word? Snarky and sarcasm are allowed.
Oh, sure, yeah, that's fine.
And this is a very important rule because there will be alcohol available.
Yeah, that's
that
where
you have to be.
That's interesting that he's going to specifically target those disfranchised folks who they're small number of the gaming population here.
Well, I don't think he's trying to
Only,
run his store based on his people.
But he's open.
But he wants to let these
see how
people
that
know
goes.
that you're welcome here.
Now, has he done this before elsewhere?
I do not know.
Okay.
I don't know what his experience in running a store is. His wife does all the stage
should ask him
setting.
if he wants to be on the show. We could interview him.
Sure,
We could
that'd
talk
be a great
about
idea.
his motivations and such for doing this, and doing it the way he's doing it. Why he thinks that that's a winning combination, and any prior experiences and such.
Yeah.
So if you want to ping him about that.
Okay, I'll do that. We'll see if we can get him. He's a new place. And if, by the way, any of you other store owners are listening in and want to be on the show, talk
community
to us.
programs, any of them, we'll be happy to talk to you on the show. And it's a good chance for you to plug what you're doing, and then we'll ask you more in-depth questions. We might ask you more psychological stuff as well, motivational such. But yeah, that would be great. But yeah, it's interesting that he's specifically targeted the people who have been kicked out of other stores. Now, some of them have been kicked out because of politics.
Right.
But a number of them are kicked out because they did things like throw tantrums, flip the table, flip the chair, scream and yell, really inappropriate behavior. That's the ones I'm concerned about. You start combining alcohol with people who already have behavioral issues.
Right.
That will be interesting to see how that unfolds. It'll be interesting to see if he can maintain that policy, or if he has to over time, because some of these people have serious mental health issues.
Just a second chance concept.
Sure.
I'll give you a chance. I'll give everybody a chance.
Yeah, well, in every store, that's how it is. I mean, every store doesn't know that they've been kicked out from the other stores.
There is not a blacklist, despite rumors. There is not a blacklist.
As far as we know. Yeah, well, that'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. We should keep an eye on that just to see. Add that to our data repository.
Speaking of store owners to interview, I think I would like to honor the owner of Gamers Haven and talk to him about accessibility and
Bob or Bill?
Bob.
Yeah, Bob. Yeah, because
Well, because he one time had a conversation with me of all the work he did and to make sure the table heights were appropriate for wheelchairs and people who had to stand at them, the lighting, what kind of lighting he did to make things better. The things that he went through for as an accessibility standpoint and to create the proper environment.
ask him. I don't know if he will. He always seems too busy, but
Right,
ask
he's
him.
incredibly
Go
busy.
for it. We'd be happy to have him. So
We can talk
add him
to
to the
his,
list.
his considerations of the good environment for a gaming.
Sure. That would be good. That would be good. Especially, so I've also got that interview of Guardian Games in Portland from the RPG tour.
Right.
Also, that'll be exclusively uploaded to our Patreon supporters. And it was all about they have a person dedicated to accessibility and inclusiveness issues there at their facility. So we have a lengthy interview with her on those topics. That'll be on the Patreon site before too long.
And another segue, speaking of interviews and broadcasts like that, you have D&D and Prisons documentary
Yes.
that we're maybe
So,
hoping getting going?
right. So let me, because this is the same person who already has done. So she's been for 10 years. Let me find. Here it is. So remember, we've talked about. There was a video that came out about D&D in prisons, and then. Come on, is it going to load here? Okay. So Waypoint Specials Escaping Prison with Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not sure if that's the right one. I had the link. She sent me the links. Let me pull it up here. I should have had this ready. I'm sorry. Juggling so many things.
It's been a rough month.
Well, I've gone through over 100 applications yesterday to RPG research. Over 100 applications, and I'm only about half to 2/3 of the way through the backlog, which is wonderful, but taking up a lot of my time. So let's see here. Let me get the right link. So anyway, she interviewed me while I was on the tour. We talked for about almost 2 hours, and she wanted to see me on camera, so it was over Skype. And she liked what she saw and heard and is excited about it. So she's already started talking to the Washington State Department of Corrections to see, because I've been wanting to. I've done a little bit with it in jails and such,
Right.
going back to the early '90s, and I've worked with a lot of transitional people going from inpatient, outpatient, or incarcerated to not incarcerated. But I haven't had a chance. Come on, load already. Haven't had a chance to actually implement full-blown programs in prison. Now,
Right.
the professor and head in charge of the therapeutic recreation program at Eastern Washington University, Professor Emily Messina. Well, it does not want to load. What's going on with my connection?
My connection's still good.
Yeah, I think my laptop's acting up. She, on her doctoral thesis, so she was, during internship stuff, worked with prisoners in Florida. And these were pretty hardcore ones. And then she did recreation therapy with them. She's really liked what she's seen me doing with RPG research over the years. She was my instructor in a lot of classes working towards the multidisciplinary degree. And she joined our board this year, the RPG research board, because she likes what we're doing. So she has a lot of background of doing recreational programs in prisons that I'm going to be picking her brain for. And but I've gotten a couple of letters from prisoners asking me to talk to the superintendent here at the Eastern State Prison and such. And I just, with the load of everything, I haven't had a chance to, but I've always wanted to tackle that. Because since the 80s, gaming has been banned in prisons. Now, there's been a little bit of turnaround with it starting to change, but it takes an overt effort from people who are not incarcerated to
Right.
make that change.
It's hard for somebody who's in jail to ask for extra privileges.
Yeah.
Or anything. To ask for anything.
Yeah. So here I've got the links. So there's it is Waypoint. So there's a Vice documentary that she's already done. And you, I think, already saw this.
Yes.
So that's her. That's her organization. Dungeons and Dragons in the Department of Corrections. Inmates at a Colorado's maximum security prison use Dungeons and Dragons to collaborate, exercise their creativity, all without dice because of the rules and such. But so she's also currently working on a program at Santaquin jails in California, and I guess it's some lawyer fellow out of San Francisco who's been helping with that program. And while she's excited about the program, she's concerned that he doesn't have the same background. And so I might get added to that documentary. And it's going to be a pilot at least, and it may become a series. And so the goal is I'm going to be spinning up as a project. Now, this is in addition to everything else.
Right.
So it may be next year before we really see
With
it
our
come to
copious
fruition.
free time.
And it might be next year before we see it coming to fruition. But I'm going to start contacting the prisons in Washington, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and California, and see if find out what their current policies are about role-playing games, if they're banned or not. Now, Dr. B, Rafael Bocamatzo over in Seattle, was part of something that the Monroe prison, apparently they got permission.
Okay.
And so I've asked him to fill me in on those details, and he's going to email me back with details. And because the first thing Department of Corrections asks is there any precedent?
Right.
So after I reach out to them, then the question is going to be, will you let us run a program using role-playing games, a managed program, overseen by us, or similar people. And then the last thing is where I want to get it to eventually is, once we show that it's not a danger, because that's what they're afraid it'll be a danger, is that then allow the prisoners to role-play self-directed in prison during their rec time. Right? They have a very structured rec time, etc., and just allow that to be on the list. And it can be like any other rec time where in the rec room, you got to check stuff in and out. It doesn't leave the room, all that stuff. You'd have to use, trustees, etc., to oversee and, to reduce the risk. There's never 100% lack of risk. But so she's been doing documentaries for about 10 years. And it looks like we might have somebody documenting my efforts, win or fail. Like I welcome the people who absolutely reject if we can get them on camera, voicing their reasons. Getting them on camera will be a challenge, or even if they do it in writing, it's a letter and they're like, hey, look at this. I think it's going to make a very interesting documentary / series, because I would like to see the prison ban against role-playing games removed from every prison in this country. It is something that is stuck in my craw for a long time. It's completely bogus. The excuses they come up with are not supported by the research and the facts.
It's not gambling. They're not going to be able to use it.
There's lots of ways to mitigate the risks so that it is no greater risk than basketball or any of the other activities that they're allowed to do. Yeah, I don't know how many places allow dominoes, but if there's a gambling element, it's generally banned, and I get that. But the benefits of this are so outweigh the potential risks, and again, you can moderate those risks.
Right. So
that's Elizabeth DeClear, and so she's in the early stages of that, and it was a wonderful interview, and we're having a nice regular back and forth. And I'm planning to do this anyway. This just kind of moved it up the list of my to-do list. So I'll probably start here, at the nearest prison and work my way out in a spiral. The other one is also the mental health facilities, like Eastern State Hospital. The fellow in charge of the TR program there, who I believe is in his 60s, has bought into all of the negative myths about gaming. He's been at my presentations. And when I was speaking with him, and he has one of the largest TR groups on this side of the state. He has 16 therapeutic recreational specialists under him, I believe. That's pretty big for one facility to have that many rec specialists and TR specialists. He said to my face, over my dead body will role-playing games be added to my programs. He's too afraid of the dissociative and violence and all of that, and he's like, not a chance. Not a chance. And walked away while I was in the middle of talking to him. But his other staffers were very excited about what I had to say, who were about 20 years younger.
Yep. He'll go away eventually.
So there's retirement looming. I'm patient. I'm in this for the long haul. I'm looking at things in a decades-long perspective. And I can wait. But I would love to get him on camera with his reasons. And so we'll see. We'll see how this unfolds. It could be very, very interesting, I think. So that's going on, which is very cool. Very excited about that. Okay, I lost our channel here to follow. Okay, there we go.
Future events coming up?
Yes. So we got, there's a lot going on. Good stuff. I'm going to be at PAX Unplugged, which is in the East Coast in Pennsylvania. Let me pull that up here. And okay, so I'm on it, and I'm on there on the roster. If you go to PAX site, site.com, you can find it. But it's unplugged.paxsite.com, schedule, panel, and the name of the panel is Bringing Others to the Table. Now, thank you, Dr. B, Rafael Bocamazzo, for he offered to include me in his proposal for this panel. That was very kind of him. I thank him very much. So the other panelists include Megan A. Connell, which she's co-founder of Geeks Like Us, and that's wonderful. We've been following her stuff with it.
Psychology at the Table.
I don't want to sound like the Emperor. We'll be following your work with great interest. Adam Davis, co-founder of Game to Grow. Tanya DePass, founder of I Need Diverse Games. I'm not familiar with that one. I'll check that out.
Yeah, that's
Dr. B, clinical director of Take This. Carlos Luna, streamer and podcaster, The Dungeon Rats. Not familiar with that one either. So we're all on the same panel, and that will be Saturday, December 1st, 10:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. in the Leviathan Theater. Now, that's tentatively the time. The date shouldn't change, but the time could shift.
Eastern time.
That is Eastern time, because this is in Pennsylvania, and it won't be streamed. So if you want to see it, you got to show up. I'll see if I can get them to record it. Hopefully we can at least get a recording.
Right.
But as far as I know, none of this stuff's streamed. To very few places stream, I guess, because they want people to show up. So.
Right. They don't want.
But they should at least record and make it available to excite people to come to future ones. That's my argument. But so here's how they described it. This is how Dr. B set up the panel. RPGs are for everyone. Why wouldn't they be? We want as many friends around the table as we can get. However, there are sometimes barriers, both obvious and subtle, physical and cultural, to people joining in on the fun. Join Take This and our panel of inclusivity activists as they discuss their barriers to play, as well as their practical tips on how to include diverse groups of people at your table, which I just spent an 8-state, 26-day tour about accessibility and inclusiveness in gaming and
Felt
music.
like 26 weeks.
What's that?
Felt like 26 weeks.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Eventful indeed. If you want to see if you didn't follow it, I set up a separate Twitter just for the RPG tour under @RPG tour under Twitter, which also is a repeater for our Instagram under RPG Research. So under Instagram, I did a lot of 1-minute videos and a lot of photos along the way with updates. A lot of it's kind of turned into a vehicle show as the bus kept breaking down.
Dead on the Road, starring Hawk Robinson.
Roadkill. So that was not as much as I would have liked. As far as I wanted to be more gaming related, it was an adventure. But I did. I got some great interviews and met some great people. And we've got a new volunteer down in Tucson. An anthropology student has joined. Brandon has joined us, and he's been already active in our games and such.
Yeah, he played a couple games with me.
Yep, remoting in from Tucson.
And I didn't scare him off, so it's
and
okay.
He's studying to become an RPG advocate so that he can speak to the administrative staff at U of A to get us to come down there and do a whole presentation and get them to consider these topics. And as an anthropology student, these things are very near and dear to him. So that was wonderful. I met another fellow, Joe, who's been on Clinical Role 5 times. He said, the only reason he didn't stay on it more frequently is his work and school schedule. So met with him for a few hours, and he's working on his doctoral thesis in leadership at the University of San Diego on role-playing gaming on various very interesting topics. So we had a great discussion. Unfortunately, it wasn't recorded. He didn't agree to that, but it was very enjoyable discussion. And another person, I don't have the books here. Darn, I need to get me out of the trailer. The woman who did the superhero therapy and the fantasy, adventure fantasy therapy.
Role-playing, yeah.
Both of those books. So she was in the San Diego area as well, and unfortunately her work schedule, she wasn't able to make it. But so there's people. I got to meet people all over the eight great states, and there's many more to go. 42 others. I don't know about Hawaii and Alaska, but we'll see.
I think we're going to have trouble with the bus trying to get to Hawaii.
Yeah, I think so. Well, put it on a ship. So that's going on. And then the next thing is coming up just in a couple of weeks is from Zombie Orpheus Entertainment. Join the Gamers in Seattle November 10th for a backer party. So if you backed the Gamers, the series, and those of you know what I'm talking about, if you don't, go check it out. You get a first look at the script for the next episode and a chance to play games and hang out with the cast. Now, unfortunately, when I clicked it, because I'm a donor and I get a ticket, the system's not working. So I got to get a hold of Ben and go, hey, I can't get in. But I might be shooting on out to Seattle just that Saturday. So I'll leave Friday right after our drop-in at RPG session. I'll hit the road to Seattle, get there late that night, do this Saturday, and then drive back either late Saturday night or early Sunday morning and be back in time for our show and everything. But that's around November 10th. So I may or may not be there. I'm trying to get there. We'll see. But if you're in the area and you were a backer, make sure you answer that email. And I just thought folks would be interested to know that the script for the next Gamer Series episode series is coming out. Woo! Woo!
I'm still waiting for Journey Quest 4.
Yeah, well, they just barely funded Journey Quest 3.5, which is kind of a stepping stone towards 4. It barely squeaked by. It was down to a few hours. They didn't, as far as I know, they didn't make any stretch goals. I did donate what I could on that. I'm broke after the road trip. I am stretched very thin, like butter scraped over too much toast.
Nobody out there caught that reference. I know it.
Yeah, it's a Hobbit reference. But I'll recover in a month or 3, but I'm physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted, because there were some interesting personal challenges along the way, and financially exhausted temporarily.
But did you level up?
I have to recuperate first.
Right.
I have to do some processing. I've got to do some heavy processing. Yeah, there was some it was interesting. So, let's see here. I lost my, there we are. So let's see what else Other Minds Magazine issue 19 is out. If you go to omzine.org, omzine.org, or othermindsmagazine.com, you can get issue number 19. And so I helped, so Other Hands Magazine was focused on role-playing gaming in Middle-earth, and that ran from 93 to 2001 under Professor Chris Seaman, till they were given a cease and desist because of the movies. And then I booted up in 2005 was when the kernel of it started, but 2007 was when the first issue came out of Other Minds Magazine, which is based on a quote from Tolkien about other hands and minds building on his works and elaborating further. And then Thomas Mowinski, Dr. Thomas Mowinski in Germany, has kept it going since. So I'm hosting it and I help him with technical issues, but he's been handling the lion's share of the editorial work. And he has permission from Howe and the other artists to have their artwork in the magazine. So my magazine, because I didn't want to deal with licensing issues, was plain text. It didn't have much in the way of artwork. Now it has lots of wonderful, beautiful artwork in addition to really great content. So definitely check that out. I'm waiting to get the table of I mean, I guess I could just look at the issue, but check it out. And you'll see the table of contents for all the prior issues are up there. We try to put out an issue or 2 a year. It varies. It's free. It's a PDF download. The only hard copies are the ones I printed here. It's all under Creative Commons license. And even if you're not a gamer, if you're a Tolkien fan, it is great content for scholars and fans in general. And then if you happen to be a Tolkien gamer, this is the source to go to. And it doesn't matter what the game system is, whether it's MERP or Decipher, D&D, or AIM or Tor or whatever. This material is really, really rich. A lot of maps and other things that you really want to check out. So that's omzine.org, omzine.org. And I wanted us to say, I forget, it came up when you were talking about something about introducing people to gaming, and I've discussed this before. We've done it with our Star Wars game evaluations and such, right, where we're trying. They claim no preparation necessary. Just open it up, and all of you can start playing. And as we've gone through the box sets of Star Wars, that has not been the case. It's unfortunate, but it is too complicated to make that claim. And I have long said we need a simpler introduction to role-playing gaming. The problem is even the introductory D&D box set is too complicated for people who have never role-played. They kind of rely on somebody who has at least played and has the concept. They don't break it down quite enough. The only one I think that is done, and I'm sure there are better ones out there or other ones out there, I just haven't come across them. But the single hands down best that I think every game company out there should model after for an introductory set. Now again, we're talking about introducing people who've never role played, first of all to play without anybody else to DM them. They're going to learn to play by themselves. Second of all, they want to put their own group together and DM for the first time, having never DM'd before and only played by themselves, really. That's a huge jump from never role played to play by yourself to DM, and you've never played with anybody else yet. None of them do that. But the old 1983 Frank Metzer original basic D&D box set, which came with everything you needed, the dice, etc. There's the character sheet on the back.
And what do you mean by Frank Metzer, Ron?
That's that's the
artist?
The author. Well, it's the revised by Frank Metzer.
Okay.
He's the one who wrote this. this version of D&D. It's the Frank Menser version, which later goes in the D&D Cyclopedia. By the way, you can buy the PDF of this now on DriveThru RPG and RPG Now and such. You can buy the PDF. They unfortunately don't have the print on demand for it, strangely. They do for some of the others, and they have tons of modules now that are print on demand.
They have a print on demand for BECME, so they probably think it's redundant.
Well, they have a print on demand for the Rules Cyclopedia.
Right.
They don't have it for each of the separate ones, which are different. Rules Cyclopedia doesn't have any of this introductory stuff.
Okay.
It assumes, it puts it all together for you after you already experienced it. It's better organized than the separate ones. But they should keep the ones, they should make them available. But anyway, you can download the PDF, you can print it yourself, whatever. It's not very big. The player's manual is only 36 pages, and the GM's manual is only 48 pages.
Less than to put together an IKEA.
Yeah, yeah. So, anyway, this starts you through with basically a choose your own adventure with dice. And it only gives you 1 or 2 stats at a time, and you do your first adventure by page 3. And then you're going through highlighted sections, reading, and it walks you through step by step, and then slowly layers on saving throw, additional stats. And then they go into more depth. Now you have a basic idea of the concept. Now they start saying, oh, now you go back to town and spend your money and buy equipment. And now you know how to buy equipment. And now you get better choice. And then they start talking about the other dice. They haven't even hit you with the other dice yet until after that.
Right.
This is layered beautifully. If you want to teach a complex subject, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, this is the way to approach it. You don't have to dumb down. This is my pet peeve. You know how I am about this.
Right.
You don't have to dumb down the role-playing game to make it accessible to everybody.
Don't have to use smaller words.
You may need to take it in smaller steps and slowly layer up, so that, because different people process at different levels and can take in more information at different speed. Great, I accept that. You don't have to dumb down the language. You don't have to dumb down the system. You can get as complex a system as you want if you have the right introductory approach. So this is the best illustration of that. And we are streaming, Lila, just so you know, but welcome. We're overlapping into our 6 to 9 broadcast here.
There was supposed to be a gap, but somebody lost that.
Yeah, we both did. We're both guilty of that one. So then the Dungeon Master one walks you through and tells you exactly what to read to your players, and then what section to jump to as they go through the map and everything. And it tells you, read this section, don't read this section. Old school, but people poo-poo old school, and they're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Yes, there are problems with old school approaches, but not everything.
Right.
You don't need to throw everything out and start all over and make all the same mistakes or different mistakes. You can learn and build. When you ignore history and you ignore what people did before, you end up just starting all over again. I watched it with Java and Android. They started from scratch all over again, and they've made a nightmare of a language compared to what Java was originally. But the Android version is a piece of crap. Because they threw everything out. They threw everything out, the baby with the bathwater, and refused to learn from their predecessors. They assumed everything the predecessors did because they were old must be not worthwhile. So, anyway, if you're developing a game and you want to introduce new people, check this out. You can get the PDFs. They're like $5. Check it out. That being said, I'm going to throw a little something in here I feel very strongly about. I've been watching the new Doctor Who.
Yes. You think it's
Have you
too
seen
preachy?
it yet?
I'm caught up.
Yeah, I am caught up too.
So you feel it's too preachy?
So speaking of dumbing down,
Mm-hmm.
do you remember 321 Contact back in the 70s?
Yes.
80s, PBS shows.
I remember
They would
that.
teach, topics to little kids, and it was very much like a civic classroom study, especially that last one with Rosa Parks and such. They're completely missing the point. So Tolkien went on at length about how if you want to teach something, using myth is a much more powerful way to teach than just doing it straight on. But that aside, whoever the new writers are, suck. I think the woman playing the new Doctor Who has great potential, but the writing is atrocious. And the directing is atrocious. It's shot very much more in the style of not Broadchurch. One of the spin-offs.
Torchwood.
Torchwood, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Broadchurch is a different show. It's shot very much in the darker style of Torchwood. It's much slower. The speech, everybody speaks so slowly. It feels like it's written by 6th graders for 3rd graders. The language, Katie is a master's in English. She teaches at Yale University. She's also a tech writer, and she's been railing about how, from AT&T and other places, they're forcing her to lower the education level that she writes her manuals for. So it used to be you could write for college level. Then you had to write for 12th grade high school. Then you had to write for 9th grade. So she had to write for 9th grade or even 6th grade for these manuals now, because they're dumbing things down and dumbing things down and dumbing things down.
If
that is not the same as
If you can only handle
accessibility.
6th grade, then can you handle the product you're working with?
Well, these are, technology's more available to a lot of people,
Right.
but that's not the point. We saw that whole thing with the first time with IQs going down for the first time, and the whole time it's been tracked. And if you don't push people to reach and grow, which is what role-playing gaming has been so great at doing, it helps people grow beyond their normal comfort zone and reach and grow and go beyond what they thought their limits were. If you dumb things down so much to the lowest level so that there's no effort necessary to grow and stretch, you're really hurting everybody. So these people who think they're making it more accessible, I think, are doing far more harm. And I know it's unintended consequences. And the same with Doctor... And you know what? It breaks my heart. I've been following Doctor Who since the 70s. I think the woman playing Doctor Who has great potential. I think she just has crappy writers and a crappy director. The cast, I think, has potential. Crappy writers, crappy director. So both Katie and I can't take it anymore. We're like done for now. We can't watch it anymore. It's too painful. For me, it's heartbreaking to watch what they've done to it. This is what happens when you write to an agenda rather than a storyline.
Right. I mean, it was very obvious with that last one that they were trying to prove a point.
But they belabored it. They belabored it to death. Yeah. I'm fully in support of the concepts, but they wrote it so poorly and it was so belabored. And it was kind of like watching a 1950s propaganda. Remember all the 1950s educational thing and duck and cover and all those things, how that style was? This was just like that. Joe is going to go down the car today because he's a good American and blah, 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 right? It's exactly like that. This was 3rd grade propagandist stuff, unfortunately, is the style it was written in, unfortunately, which breaks my heart. I am fully in support of the topics. Really bad execution. We were talking before about, or maybe I was talking with somebody, concept versus implementation. Yeah, the game master, find a game master platform. I think the concept's valid. Their implementation didn't work. That doesn't mean the message is invalid. I think right now with what they're doing with Doctor Who, I think the implementation's broken. Now, we'll see what the numbers say. I don't know what the viewership numbers are. Maybe it's working. I don't know. But they're certainly losing, others. I don't know how you're feeling about it. I'd love to hear your take on it, but that's where I'm at and Katie's at.
I think the 2nd episode was the best episode, but it's also, the 1st episode has the problem of it's an introductory level, and you have to
that's always a challenge.
To be very basic.
That's always a challenge, sure.
The 3rd was written with a very obvious agenda behind it. I'm not even sure what I think about that, how they solved the problem of the villain.
Well, and he's going to come back the way they did that.
Right.
He's going to have some ramifications.
Meets the Silurians?
Who knows? Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, who knows? He's going to be back. That was obvious. The literally writing on the wall, all the stuff.
Yeah.
And then at the end, the whole exposition. The whole history lesson exposition. That is not Doctor Who style. And they made it clear. They're going to throw everything else out and do it completely differently. Which means they're starting over.
When Doctor Who first came out, it had 2 types of episodes. You had the history episode.
Yes.
And then you had the fantasy episode.
Yes. And they taught through the story, not through exposition.
Right. It was you got taught through the story of the history, and then you got taught through the science fiction.
Yes.
And the possibilities things.
Yes.
And maybe even the morality plays.
Yes.
But it was never over the top, beat you in the head with the club version
goodness,
this 3rd episode was.
Yeah.
I'm
and they
hoping
made it clear they're hoping to do a lot. That's the plan for the series.
that's the whole series. They're
So
going
when
to
they
keep doing
launched, they had so we watched the special edition launch, which has all of them up on the stage talking.
Yeah.
And they said, this is how we're going to do this whole series. So this whole series is going to be like this.
That's going to be less enjoyable. One of the reasons
breaks my
is
heart.
because it's preaching to the choir.
Right.
The Doctor Who audience already is on board with these ideas.
Yeah, it is. It is totally. You're not going to bring in people who disagree. You are not going to bring them in with this. This is not a winning formula.
Yeah.
You want to hook people to new concepts, hook them on stuff they're interested in, and then in a mature, intelligent way, insert the other things. It doesn't have to be deceptive. It can be totally open, but do it a little bit at a time, and do it in an intelligent, mature, which Doctor Who has done for decades, effectively. This is not effective.
Another show. It was written with an agenda, and the best review I ever saw of this show was from somebody who was against that agenda. So the agenda is SJW, social justice warriors,
Right.
that kind of stuff. This inclusivity, this all lifestyles are acceptable, all that kind of stuff type thing. This guy is anti those people.
Right.
He said, if you're going to do a show about these type of topics and make this as your bread and butter, Steven's Universe is the show to do. It's a cartoon
Okay.
on Cartoon Network that has an openly gay married couple.
Okay.
Which they had to build up to the actual marriage, but they were married in all other aspects up to that point. He said this was it. They got their point across through good storytelling.
Right.
And they didn't say, I'm a gay couple.
Right.
They were there. They just were there and they were doing their
through
stuff.
modeling and normalization,
Right.
that's what you want to do with these concepts. You want them to become normalized and generalized throughout the culture. You do that through modeling, not through exposition. Exposition is preachy and puts walls up. If you just illustrate, so show rather than tell. Good storytelling, especially television and movies and stuff, you're supposed to show it through the story. Role-playing gaming. Do you enjoy a role-playing game where I just sit and read to you all the plot things and occasionally give you one choice to make, like choose your own adventure or something?
Right.
Or do you enjoy something where, instead of saying, well, the clues seem to be this, this, and this, or do I say, well, you notice this room, and then you say, well, what do I notice over here? Oh, well, you notice there's a cabinet. Well, what do I see on the cabinet? Well, it looks like there's some fingerprints left on the door. Oh, I want to see what's in there. And then reveal it in layers and show it, rather than just say, oh, and in the drawer you find this, and oh, and over in here you find this. Which is more engaging and more interesting for you? Which feels like you're part of the story?
The second one, obviously.
Yes.
And, when you get the players who are sitting there, because I'm always the guy on the other side of the stage, where I'm watching them getting the light bulbs. They don't need to be told that this plus this equals the other thing. Yeah. They're going, wait a minute, I've seen the connection here.
So the writers and the director need to not look down on everybody else so much, because it's so condescending. And it is an assumption of ignorance and stupidity that is being pushed out there that's outright insulting. And instead, make good stories and include, the content you want to include, but do it in an intelligent way. This was not. This was sixth graders writing for third graders. And this was totally in the style of 1940s and 50s propagandist filmmaking. No different than, than the fascists as well as the Americans and such. It is. If you go look at that, how that was done, this was in that style. They are not creating anything new here. They're starting over.
Right.
They're starting over at a juvenile level. I hope this doesn't kill the Doctor Who franchise. I hope that they can recover from this glaring mistake.
And the sad part is they're going to blame if they're going
they
to
will
blame,
say it is the racists and middle-aged white men and stuff like that. Well, it won't be that they did a bad job with their story.
Even the point is, it was misogyny that destroyed us, because it failed because we dared to bring a woman on here.
I don't care about that. That's great. Go for it. I think she has great potential if they had decent writers, because her script sucks.
Look at Killing Eve. Killing Eve. The vast majority of the characters are female.
Okay.
It is definitely a female-driven show.
Mm-hmm. Great.
It does not take you for granted. It
Good.
does make you think the whole thing through.
Push people to think. Don't try to force spoon feed.
Yeah.
That's a big mistake. That's not what people come back to shows for.
Let's see how this develops.
And again, like you say, if you're just preaching to the choir, we already know that. Get on with the story. Just tell me the story. I don't need all this. Get on with the story. Normalize these things, you bet. They could have told the exact same story in a much more normalizing way rather than a preachy way, and made all the same points, and it would have been decent entertainment rather than 1950s civic propaganda film. It breaks my heart. I really don't want to see Doctor Who die again, and I really want to see her succeed, but they're going to have to radically change what they did with their writing style and their directorship, and it's already in the can as far as I know. So this season, hopefully it doesn't kill the series.
Well, they haven't written the entire season, I'm sure.
They haven't pre-shot everything already by the time some places they shoot it all before it gets released, like they do. So a lot of series you shoot really intensely for X number of weeks, all the episodes, and then it goes into post-production and all of that. So we'll have to see. Anyway, I had to share that because it's heartbreaking. Because I love Doctor Who. I've got Scarf
Doctor Who game
and,
place.
and
I need to talk to Carla about that. She's a huge Doctor Who fan.
Yeah, see what she says. I'd love to hear. I want to hear every viewpoint on this. And Katie is very, very left of center, and she just I can't stand this. This is ridiculous. This treat me like I'm an idiot. And she pretty much exclusively votes Democrat or independent Democrat and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It totally offended her. So, yeah.
And again, preaching to the choir part. It's
Yeah.
the audience that it was trying to convince something of wasn't watching the show.
Yeah. Anyway, I try not to get into these political topics, but this relates to Doctor Who and role-playing gaming and a lot of the things I already said about dumbing down and layering complexity.
Don't treat your players like they're
idiots.
Idiots, yeah.
Yeah, treat them with respect and raise them up. If they are struggling, again, I work with people with disabilities all the time, and they're struggling, and they have cognitive impairments, and they're developmentally delayed, whatever. Don't belittle them. If they're senior citizens and such, don't belittle them. Oh my goodness, I can't tell you how many elderly and such don't talk down to me, like that. I'm not an idiot. I'm 90 years old. It doesn't make me an idiot, right?
Exactly.
And people do that. The
infantilism.
Something like that. But treating them like an infant as you get older after a certain point, ageism, all of that. Don't do it.
Players rather discover than be told.
Yeah, exactly. And in role-playing gaming and with entertainment like that, share the story. Do great story writing. I was tearing up. It just hit me so hard how disappointed I am with what they're doing. There's so many other ways this could have been delivered successfully, and it breaks my heart. I don't want to see the series turf again because it turfed back in the 80s, So We'll see what happens. Anyway, that was a little heavy, but so we are
back next time
continuing.
when we'll talk about sex in D&D. It'll be a lot more lighter.
Yeah, so tonight, right, we're going to stop this stream and then we get right back into our 6 to 9 stream. We are continuing with Robin's Laws of Good Game Mastering, the discussion and in-depth discussion about this. And we will hopefully finish this by Monday's session, because this is our theoretic discussion. But we're also, Sarah Lynn Bowman, The Functional Role-Playing Games. These are all in our upcoming stuff that I'll be reading out loud more. There's so much, I might start just doing a series where I'm just doing it. Although I prefer people to be there to do it as a dialogue. Yeah. Gary Allen Fines, this goes way back, Shared Fantasy. And of course this newer one, Role-Playing Game Studies, which I haven't had a chance to wade through yet. I'm going to be tackling all of them, plus the sex book. All of those are coming up in these coming weeks. Because it's all tying in. I want to make sure I've got the latest stuff. Most of what's in the RPG Professional's Handbook I've already written, but I want to update it with the latest stuff I can dig up to make sure I've got all that integrated into there. So, I'm going to read it, I'm going to share it with you, and we're going to have great discussions about it, and hopefully others are raised up so it floats all boats. I know that Omar in Saudi Arabia and Eric here and others have really enjoyed this approach. where we're sharing the reading together. Sometimes we don't have time to go out and do the reading on our own. If you're driving in a car and you're listening to this as a podcast, here you go. And it's with discussion. So we get to have some discussion and insight and personal experiences. So that's coming up right up in just a few minutes. We're going to wrap up the RPG Talk Show here. I think we've covered everything, right? Did we get everything on the list?
We got everything on our list.
Okay.
And then a couple more.
And then some, as we usually do.
Yep.
So, and again, this will be available to our Patreon supporters and our Twitch subscribers. For our Patreon supporters, not long after. I won't upload while we're streaming, but after the stream tonight wraps up at 9 p.m., I upload both shows right away, and they'll be there. So please swing by rpgresearch.com and click on donate, and then donate through Patreon. Or if you don't want to do Patreon, then go ahead and use PayPal, and you can make a one-time donation or a monthly subscription. That gives you access to all sorts of goodies. You can read about those on the site. So, John, thank you very much for being here for this wonderful conversation and bringing all the content you brought. I hope you, listener, are enjoying this. And wherever you may be, happy gaming and namaste.
And dream well.